The day she called my Purple Heart service dog a violation was the day I decided to show her what real violation looks like. Picture this, 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in suburban Phoenix, and I'm stumbling to my front door in boxers and a ratty army t-shirt, wondering why someone's been hammering like the world's ending. I swing open the door and there's nobody there, just an official-looking notice taped right at eye level like some bureaucratic slap in the face. "Notice of pet violation," it screams in aggressive red ink bleeding through cheap paper. "Immediate removal of oversized, aggressive breed dog required or face $500 daily fines." I'm reading this garbage while my German Shepherd Rex sits calmly beside me, wearing his official service vest, because he sensed my stress levels spiking before I even knew why. Here's a 4-year-old professionally trained PTSD service dog, doing exactly what he's supposed to do, and some power-hungry neighbor wants him gone. What would you do if someone tried to steal your lifeline? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I bet your HOA has its own horror stories. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this suburban nightmare. My name's Garrett Morrison, 34 years old, Purple Heart recipient with 2 Iraq tours under my belt and enough shrapnel scars to make TSA agents nervous. After my divorce went nuclear 18 months ago, turns out Jody really does exist, and he was my wife's CrossFit trainer. I needed somewhere Rex and I could heal without judgment. Meadowbrook Estates seemed perfect. Middle-class Phoenix subdivision, where the morning desert air carries that distinctive creosote scent mixed with cooling asphalt, and you can hear automatic sprinklers clicking across manicured lawns like suburban metronomes. I chose this house specifically for the large backyard where Rex could run off energy without neighbors complaining. Rex isn't just any dog. He's a 4-year-old German Shepherd trained specifically for PTSD and anxiety response. When my hands start shaking or my breathing gets shallow, he knows before I do. Deep pressure therapy, crowd navigation, nightmare interruption. This furry therapist has skills that cost the VA $40,000 to develop, but apparently my neighbor Brenda Whitmore had other plans. Picture every power-hungry substitute teacher you ever had, but with legal authority over your property and a white BMW sporting custom HOA1 license plates. Brenda's 58, moved here 8 years ago, and immediately ran for HOA board like she was campaigning for Supreme Court. She's got this way of standing that screams, "I demand to speak to your manager," arms perpetually crossed, lips pursed like she's been mainlining pickle juice. The woman's a real estate agent who drives through the neighborhood like she's conducting surveillance, timing her power walks to coincide with residents' daily routines. I swear she's got a spreadsheet tracking everyone's lawn watering schedule. 3 weeks before the notice incident, Brenda knocked on my door at exactly 7 p.m. She's pathologically punctual about her harassment schedule. The smell of her aggressive perfume lingered in my doorway like a chemical weapon. "Your dog's barking disturbs the peace," she announced, though Mrs. Olivia next door later told me she'd never heard Rex bark once in 18 months. "He's a service animal," I explained calmly, because the VA taught us patience with civilians who don't understand invisible disabilities. Her response chilled me to the bone. "I don't see any blindness here." When I cited ADA law about psychiatric service animals, keeping my voice educational rather than defensive, Brenda's parting shot promised war. "We'll see about that," delivered with this icy smile that made my PTSD sensors ping. Most neighbors here are decent people. Mrs. Olivia brings Rex homemade dog treats and tells stories about her late husband's army service. The Rodriguez family waves supportively, and their teenagers think Rex is cooler than Marvel superheroes. Even Bob the mailman stops to scratch Rex's ears during deliveries. But Brenda controls 3 allies on the 7-person HOA board, creating a voting bloc that can weaponize bureaucracy like a suburban mafia. And she'd been preparing her attack with military precision. The setup was surgical. Rex had exactly 1 incident, barked at a raccoon rummaging through garbage at 11 p.m. Normal dog behavior that any reasonable person would ignore. But Brenda was waiting with Ring doorbell footage like some suburban NSA agent, ready to file formal complaints citing Covenant 7.3 noise violations. Here's where it gets interesting. My IT security background makes me really good at digital forensics, and when I started researching our governing documents, I found something fishy. The original 2008 Neighborhood Covenant specifically allowed working animals without size restrictions. But the current online version, mysteriously updated in 2019, had omitted that clause entirely. Someone had been playing games with our legal documents. That evening, Mrs. Olivia approached with community intel over green tea that tasted like liquid courage. Brenda had been recruiting neighbors to document incidents. The mailman warned me about her fishing expeditions regarding my dog situation. The Rodriguez family quietly revealed that Brenda had threatened their fence permit when they refused to participate in her surveillance campaign. 3 foreclosed homes in our neighborhood, all previous targets of Brenda's HOA violation campaigns. That's when I realized this wasn't about noise or aggressive breeds. This was about real estate, money, and forcing out residents who didn't fit Brenda's profitable suburban vision. Game on, lady. Brenda didn't waste time. 72 hours after our doorway confrontation, a certified letter arrived that felt thick enough to choke a horse. The envelope's weight screamed expensive legal intimidation, and that aggressive red ink was bleeding through like it had a personal grudge against trees. Inside, Brenda had crafted a bureaucratic masterpiece of petty tyranny. Emergency board hearing demanded within 72 hours. Multiple covenant violations cited, pet size restrictions, aggressive breed prohibitions, noise ordinances that apparently applied retroactively to that one raccoon incident. The letter was CC'd to all 7 board members, creating an official paper trail designed to make this look legitimate rather than personal vendetta. The threat was crystal clear: appear before the board or face immediate legal action and $500 daily fines. In the morning desert heat, my coffee mug hit the granite counter harder than intended, the sharp crack echoing through my kitchen like a gunshot. Rex immediately pressed against my legs, that familiar, concerned whine telling me my stress levels were redlining. But here's where Brenda made her first catastrophic mistake. She picked a fight with someone who actually knows how to research. I spent that evening diving deep into federal disability law, remembering something my VA counselor had mentioned during one of our sessions. Federal law always trumps local rules when it comes to disability accommodations, she'd said, explaining why my college couldn't charge extra fees for Rex's campus access. The Americans with Disabilities Act isn't just a suggestion. It's constitutional bedrock that private covenants can't touch, no matter how fancy their legal language sounds. My IT background kicked into overdrive as I cross-referenced HOA authority against federal protections. What I discovered would make any civil rights attorney start calculating billable hours. HOAs can regulate a lot of things, but they absolutely cannot override federal disability accommodations. Period. Game over. Brenda might as well try to repeal gravity. But my digital forensics uncovered something even more explosive. Remember those mysteriously modified covenants? I'd found the smoking gun buried in archived web pages that Brenda probably thought had vanished forever. The original 2008 governing documents specifically stated that working animals, including but not limited to service dogs, therapy animals, and livestock guardians, were exempt from size restrictions and breed prohibitions. That protective language had been quietly deleted in a 2019 routine update that nobody seemed to remember voting on. Someone had deliberately sabotaged our legal foundation to eliminate protections for disabled residents. The next morning brought intelligence from my growing neighborhood spy network. Mrs. Olivia appeared at my door with the scent of jasmine tea clinging to her cardigan and fresh intel that made my blood boil. Brenda had been making rounds like some suburban Gestapo, recruiting neighbors to document any incidents involving Rex. She'd pressured the Rodriguezes about installing security cameras for everyone's safety, code for help me build a harassment case. Even Bob the mailman had noticed Brenda's sudden interest in my delivery schedule and pointed questions about my dog situation. The woman was building a prosecution case like Rex had committed war crimes instead of barking at trash pandas. But Brenda's surveillance campaign was about to backfire more spectacularly than a gender reveal party in drought season. My cybersecurity training includes digital evidence collection, so I'd already started documenting everything with the methodical precision that once tracked insurgent communications in Baghdad. Security cameras covering all property angles, time-stamped screenshots of every social media interaction, audio recording equipment for future encounters, perfectly legal in Arizona's one-party consent state. Then came Brenda's psychological warfare phase. She began driving past my house multiple times daily, her white BMW prowling the neighborhood like a suburban shark. The timing was surgical. She'd appear exactly during Rex's yard time, camera phone ready to capture any behavior she could weaponize as aggressive. The smell of her exhaust lingered in the desert air like territorial marking from some predatory animal. Here's where the plot thickened into something worthy of a crime drama. While documenting Brenda's stalking pattern, I stumbled across property records that revealed her true game. 3 homes in our neighborhood had been foreclosed in the past 2 years. All 3 families had been targets of sudden, aggressive HOA violation campaigns. All 3 properties had been purchased below market value by buyers represented by, plot twist, Brenda's realty company. This wasn't random neighbor harassment. This was a systematic real estate scam designed to terrorize homeowners into distressed sales that padded Brenda's commission checks. I reached out to those displaced families over the weekend, and their stories read like a harassment playbook. Sudden violation notices for microscopic infractions. Escalating fines that made selling seem like financial survival. Friendly offers from Brenda to help them escape the HOA nightmare at fire sale prices. The pattern was unmistakable, predatory, and definitely illegal under fair housing laws. But Brenda had made one crucial miscalculation. She'd targeted a disabled veteran with federal protections, military strategic training, and a service dog whose legal status was bulletproof under constitutional law. As I prepared for the upcoming kangaroo court hearing, one thing crystallized with diamond clarity. This fight had evolved beyond Rex. This was about protecting future families from a suburban predator who weaponized bureaucracy to steal people's homes. Time to show this HOA Karen what actual justice looks like when you pick the wrong fight. The HOA hearing was scheduled for Thursday evening in the community clubhouse, and Brenda had stacked the deck like a Vegas dealer with a gambling problem. She'd called in her 3-person voting block: Chuck, a retired cop who still carried himself like he was working patrol; Linda, an accountant who looked at everything through spreadsheet-tinted glasses; and Dave, a contractor who owed Brenda referrals for half his business. But Brenda's masterstroke was the community-wide email blast she sent 2 days before the hearing. Subject line: "Dangerous dogs in our family neighborhood." The message painted Rex as some kind of suburban menace, threatening property values and children's safety, conveniently forgetting to mention his federal service animal status or my disability. The smell of industrial carpet cleaner hit me as I walked into that clubhouse, Rex beside me in his official service vest, looking more professional than half the board members. I'd brought everything: service dog documentation, federal law printouts, and my phone recording everything, because Arizona's one-party consent law is a beautiful thing. Brenda opened the meeting with parliamentary procedure designed to limit my speaking time, Robert's Rules of Order weaponized by someone who'd clearly been practicing. She'd even brought a little gavel, because apparently suburban power trips require proper props. "Mr. Morrison," Chuck interrupted when I tried to present my ADA documentation, "how do we really know this animal is properly trained? Anyone can buy a vest online these days." That's when Rex demonstrated why the VA spent $40,000 on his training. Without any command from me, he sensed my rising stress and calmly positioned himself across my feet, performing deep pressure therapy with the precision of a medical intervention. The irony was delicious, Rex proving his professional training to people questioning his legitimacy. Chuck shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing that Rex's behavioral discipline exceeded his own. I presented the smoking gun evidence about the altered covenants, demanding explanation for how working animals' protections had mysteriously vanished from our governing documents. Brenda's response was pure bureaucratic deflection. These were routine updates approved by membership vote. "Great," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'd love to see the meeting minutes and voting records for those changes." The silence stretched longer than a Phoenix summer. Brenda couldn't produce documentation because the vote never happened. She'd simply edited the online covenants hoping nobody would notice or care enough to challenge her authority. Mrs. Olivia had driven over specially to serve as my character witness, and her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. Rex's gentleman dog. Never bark, never aggressive. Problem is not dog. Problem is woman who make trouble for good people. The room's energy shifted as neighbors realized they were watching a kangaroo court in action. Brenda threatened immediate fines if I continued disrupting proceedings, which was rich considering I was following proper procedures while she was violating due process rights that even HOAs have to respect. The predetermined vote was 4-3 to uphold all violations, but the real victory was exposing Brenda's methods to the community. Several neighbors who'd attended as neutral observers left looking disturbed by what they'd witnessed. Here's where my weekend research paid off in ways Brenda never anticipated. I'd spent hours digging through public property records, and the pattern I'd discovered was more damning than I'd initially realized. Not only had Brenda's realty company profited from 3 neighborhood foreclosures, but she'd also been the listing agent when those same families first moved in. She was running a long-term con: recruit families to buy homes, wait for them to settle in and make improvements that increase value, then manufacture HOA violations to force distressed sales that she could flip for massive commissions. It was real estate farming with homeowners as the crop. After the hearing, several neighbors approached me privately. The Rodriguez family asked for my attorney's contact information. Apparently, they'd been receiving preliminary violation notices about their fence height. Mrs. Patterson mentioned escalating pressure about her garden gnomes violating aesthetic standards. Even the Johnsons had gotten warnings about their basketball hoop being too visible from the street. Brenda wasn't just targeting me. She was systematically working through the neighborhood, identifying her next victims. The HOA's immediate retaliation was swift and financially brutal: $500 in daily fines starting immediately. Formal notice that unpaid violations would result in property liens within 30 days. The ultimate threat: rehome your animal or face foreclosure proceedings. Brenda personally delivered this ultimatum with a sheriff's deputy in tow. Pure intimidation theater designed to make me feel like a criminal instead of a disabled veteran being discriminated against. But her legal threats revealed a crucial weakness I'd been hoping to exploit. During my military intelligence training, we learned that desperate enemies make tactical mistakes. Brenda's escalating harassment was creating an evidence trail that would be impossible to deny in federal court. I'd already contacted Amanda Torres, a veterans legal aid attorney who specialized in ADA compliance cases. Her response to Brenda's latest threats was one word: beautiful. Federal civil rights violations carry serious financial penalties, and HOA insurance policies specifically exclude discrimination lawsuits. Every board member would be personally liable if this went to court. That evening, as Rex and I sat in our backyard, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of justice, I realized Brenda had just handed me the ammunition to end this war permanently. Brenda's desperation manifested in ways that would make a soap opera writer jealous. 3 days after the rigged hearing, she hired a private investigator because apparently stalking me personally wasn't thorough enough for her taste. The PI showed up in an unmarked van with tinted windows, parking on the public street like some discount FBI surveillance operation. This guy had telephoto lenses that could probably photograph Rex's dental work from 3 blocks away. He was documenting everything: Rex playing fetch, bathroom breaks, even our morning training sessions where Rex practiced his anxiety response protocols. I'm watching this clown through my security cameras, thinking he's trying to capture aggressive behavior from a dog whose biggest threat is excessive tail wagging. Meanwhile, Brenda escalated to psychological warfare that crossed every ethical line imaginable. She somehow got my ex-wife's contact information, probably through that same PI, and started fishing for character information about my mental stability. Jennifer, to her credit, told Brenda exactly where she could shove her harassment campaign. But the violation of privacy was breathtaking. The smell of desperation was getting stronger than Phoenix asphalt in July. Then came the animal control incident that proved Brenda had lost all connection to reality. She filed a complaint claiming Rex was unlicensed and potentially dangerous, which brought Officer Martinez to my door on a Tuesday morning. Poor guy looked embarrassed before he even started talking. "Sir, I have to investigate a complaint about an unlicensed dog, but I'm looking at what appears to be a federal service animal," he said, gesturing to Rex's official vest and the stack of documentation I'd already prepared. I handed over Rex's paperwork: service animal registration, current vaccinations, city license, and federal ADA certification. Officer Martinez flipped through everything with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too many bullshit complaints. "Mr. Morrison, this is clearly a fraudulent report," he said, shaking his head. "False animal control complaints are actually misdemeanor offenses under Arizona law. We get a lot of these from HOA disputes, and frankly, I'm tired of wasting taxpayer resources on neighborhood grudges." Here's something most people don't realize. Filing false reports with government agencies isn't just annoying, it's criminal. Officer Martinez knew Brenda from previous frivolous complaints and was building his own case against her pattern of abuse. But Brenda's real masterpiece of self-destruction was her social media campaign. She created multiple anonymous accounts to spread rumors about my fake PTSD diagnosis and unstable veteran behavior. The posts included photos of Rex without his service vest, taken during his off-duty time in my backyard, trying to make him look like an ordinary pet instead of a medical necessity. My cybersecurity background made tracing these accounts back to Brenda's IP address easier than finding sand in Arizona. Every defamatory post, every privacy violation, every attempt to undermine my disability status was being documented with forensic precision that would make prosecutors weep with joy. The community backlash against Brenda was building like a summer thunderstorm. Mrs. Olivia organized an impromptu Rex Appreciation Committee that brought homemade treats and moral support. The Rodriguez family posted a yard sign reading, "We support our veterans," that faced directly toward Brenda's house. Even Bob the mailman started taking extra time to play with Rex during deliveries, making sure Brenda could see the community solidarity from her surveillance windows. Here's where the plot thickened beyond my wildest expectations. My journalist contact at the Phoenix Business Journal had been investigating HOA corruption for months, and my case was exactly the smoking gun she needed. While digging into Brenda's real estate connections, she uncovered financial records showing Brenda's company was hemorrhaging money from multiple lawsuits over undisclosed property violations. Brenda wasn't just running a foreclosure scam, she was facing bankruptcy and desperately needed commission income from forced neighborhood sales to avoid losing her own home. Her attack on me wasn't just discrimination, it was financial survival wrapped in bureaucratic terrorism. The desperation explained everything. The escalating surveillance, the criminal complaints, the character assassination campaign. Brenda was a cornered animal fighting for her economic life, and disabled veterans were apparently acceptable collateral damage. But her biggest mistake was underestimating military strategic thinking. While she was busy playing amateur detective with surveillance cameras, I was building a federal civil rights case that would make her harassment campaign look like a tactical nuclear weapon pointed at her own face. My attorney Amanda Torres had reviewed all the evidence and delivered a verdict that made my Purple Heart feel lighter. Garrett, this is the clearest pattern of disability discrimination I've seen in 15 years of practice. Federal law doesn't just protect you, it's about to make Brenda personally liable for damages that could reach 6 figures. Every board member who'd voted to uphold discriminatory violations would face individual lawsuits. The HOA's insurance wouldn't cover civil rights violations, meaning personal assets were at risk. As I watched Brenda's BMW cruise past my house for the 4th time that day, I realized she'd just spent 3 weeks building the evidence case that would destroy her career, her finances, and her suburban kingdom. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your enemy defeat themselves while you document everything for court. Sometimes the universe hands you justice wrapped in public property records and a dash of cosmic irony. While Brenda was busy playing suburban Gestapo with her telephoto lenses and fraudulent complaints, I decided to apply my investigative skills to a different target, Brenda herself. What I discovered made my military intelligence training feel like preparation for this exact moment. Remember how Brenda weaponized covenant violations against everyone else? Turns out our HOA queen had been living in a glass house while throwing stones for 3 solid years. Her property survey, available through Maricopa County records, revealed violations so blatant they'd make a corrupt politician blush. That gorgeous pool house she used for business meetings, built 18 inches too close to the property line, violating setback requirements that were clearly spelled out in the same covenants she'd been quoting like scripture. Her decorative privacy fence exceeded height restrictions by 1.5 feet, ironically installed to hide the unpermitted shed she'd been using as her real estate office. But here's the kicker that made me laugh so hard, Rex came over to check my mental status. Brenda had been running an unlicensed commercial business from residential property for over 3 years. City zoning records showed no permits for home-based real estate operations. Property tax filings revealed she'd been claiming commercial deductions for that shed office, while the HOA covenants explicitly prohibited business activities in residential zones. Using Brenda's own fee structure against her violations, she owed approximately $52,000 in accumulated fines. The woman who'd been threatening my home with foreclosure had been living in Violation City since before I'd even moved to the neighborhood. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. My VA counselor had taught me something valuable during those early PTSD sessions. Sometimes people project their own guilt onto others as a defense mechanism. Yet Brenda's aggressive enforcement against everyone else was classic psychological displacement. She was terrified of her own rule-breaking being discovered, so she attacked others to deflect attention from her hypocrisy. But discovering Brenda's violations created a moral dilemma that kept me awake despite Rex's calming presence. I could file complaints immediately and watch her world burn, but that felt like becoming the same kind of bully she'd been. Military honor doesn't disappear just because you're fighting dirty opponents. Instead, I realized this information was better used as strategic leverage rather than a nuclear weapon. Brenda's violations gave me the ultimate insurance policy: mutually assured destruction that could end her harassment campaign without destroying her life completely. The legal implications were staggering. HOA board members aren't exempt from their own rules. If anything, their position makes violations more serious because it demonstrates selective enforcement and potential corruption. Amanda Torres explained that discrimination cases become slam dunks when you can prove the accuser is violating the same rules they're weaponizing against protected classes. This creates what we call prosecutorial misconduct in the civilian world, she said, barely containing her excitement. Brenda's been selectively enforcing rules while violating them herself. That's textbook discrimination with a side of fraud. Every threatening letter Brenda had sent, every fine she'd imposed, every violation she'd cited became evidence of a rigged system designed to target specific residents while protecting her own illegal activities. But the most beautiful part? Brenda's own surveillance and documentation obsession had created a paper trail proving she knew about covenant enforcement while simultaneously violating multiple covenants herself. Her meticulous record-keeping would become the evidence that buried her authority permanently. I had the power to end this war immediately, but something my drill sergeant taught me echoed in my mind. The best victories are the ones where your enemy defeats themselves. Brenda was digging her own grave with every escalation. My job was to keep documenting while she buried herself deeper. That evening, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of poetic justice, I sealed all the evidence in an envelope with Amanda Torres and prepared multiple strategies depending on Brenda's next moves. Rex and I had gone from defense to offense without firing a single shot. Sometimes patience and preparation beat aggression and intimidation. Brenda was about to learn that lesson the hard way. War requires allies, and I was about to assemble a team that would make Brenda's HOA power trip look like amateur hour. Time to turn this neighborhood dispute into a masterclass in community organizing with federal law backing. First recruit, Amanda Torres from Veterans Legal Aid, a civil rights attorney who specialized in ADA compliance and had a personal vendetta against discriminatory HOAs. During our strategy session in her downtown Phoenix office, surrounded by law books that smelled like justice and old paper, Amanda laid out the nuclear option. Federal civil rights complaints carry serious financial penalties, she explained, spreading case precedents across her desk like battle plans. The beautiful thing about ADA violations is that federal law doesn't just protect you, it creates personal liability for anyone who willfully violates disability protections. HOA board members can be sued individually, and their insurance won't cover civil rights violations. That last part was the golden bullet I'd been hoping for. Most people don't realize that HOA insurance policies specifically exclude discrimination lawsuits, meaning board members' personal assets become fair game when they violate federal law. Community organizer number 2, Mrs. Olivia, who'd transformed from quiet neighbor into suburban resistance leader practically overnight. The elderly widow had connections throughout the neighborhood that would make a political campaign manager jealous. Her Rex Defense Fund started with a mason jar on her kitchen counter and grew into a legitimate legal expense account within days. Many neighbors afraid of Brenda, she told me over green tea that tasted like liquid courage. But more neighbors angry about bullying good veteran. We organize quiet, then strike loud. Mrs. Olivia's casserole brigade became an intelligence network disguised as social visits. Every potluck dinner, every afternoon walk, every grocery store encounter became an opportunity to document Brenda's harassment pattern and recruit supporters. Tech support came from an unexpected source. Miguel Rodriguez Jr., the 17-year-old across the street who'd been watching this drama unfold like his own personal Netflix series. The kid had digital skills that made my IT background look like stone tablets, and he'd been documenting Brenda's social media harassment campaign with the methodical precision of a federal prosecutor. "Mr. Morrison, I've got screenshots of every fake account she created," Miguel said, pulling up files organized better than most corporate databases. "She's been posting defamatory content about your PTSD diagnosis, which violates both state privacy laws and federal disability protections. Plus, I traced her IP addresses, so we have digital fingerprints for everything." My fourth ally emerged from within enemy territory, Chuck, the retired cop board member who'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Brenda's methods. During a chance encounter at the neighborhood Circle K, where the smell of diesel fuel mixed with his obvious moral conflict, Chuck pulled me aside. "Look, I voted with Brenda because I thought this was about legitimate rule enforcement," he said, studying his coffee like it held answers. "But her behavior since the hearing has been unprofessional, potentially illegal, and definitely not what I signed up for. If she keeps escalating, I might have to reconsider my position." The community organizing tactics spread like wildfire through social networks, both digital and analog. Regular dog park meetings became strategy sessions where neighbors shared intelligence about Brenda's surveillance activities. A neighborhood petition supporting service animal rights collected 47 signatures within 3 days, with residents adding personal messages about their own experiences with Brenda's harassment. My cybersecurity background proved invaluable for evidence collection and digital forensics. Motion-activated cameras with cloud backup prevented evidence tampering. Audio recording equipment prepared for all future HOA interactions, perfectly legal under Arizona's one-party consent laws. Every harassing email, threatening letter, and surveillance incident was being documented with forensic precision that would make FBI agents proud. The media preparation phase involved my journalist contact at the Phoenix Business Journal, who'd been building her own investigative piece about HOA corruption patterns across Arizona. My case provided the human interest angle she needed. Disabled veteran versus suburban tyranny, with clear federal law violations and community impact. "This story has everything," she said during our background interview. "Disability discrimination, real estate fraud, community organizing, and a service dog who's more professional than the people trying to ban him. National outlets are going to love this." But the most crucial element of our strategy was understanding Brenda's psychological profile. Military intelligence training teaches you to analyze enemy motivations, and Brenda's pattern was textbook narcissistic control addiction. She needed to dominate others to feel powerful, which meant she'd inevitably overreach in public where witnesses could document her true character. Our plan was elegant in its simplicity: create situations where Brenda would reveal herself to the community while we maintained dignity and legal high ground. Let her hang herself with her own behavior while building an unassailable federal case. The evidence vault was complete. Chronological harassment timeline, audio-video recordings of discriminatory meetings, financial documentation of Brenda's real estate scam, and digital forensics proving her defamation campaign. Rex's role remained the same: continue being the perfect service animal while serving as a living symbol of dignity versus petty bureaucracy. 10 days until the next HOA board meeting. Time to let Brenda dig her grave deeper while we prepared to bury her authority permanently. Brenda's desperation reached levels that would make reality TV producers salivate. With her authority crumbling and the community turning against her, she pivoted to sabotage tactics that crossed from petty harassment into actual criminal behavior. First came the bribery attempt that proved she'd completely lost touch with reality. Brenda approached Jake Stevens, our city building inspector, during his lunch break at a downtown sandwich shop. The conversation, which Jake later reported to the ethics office, went exactly like you'd expect from someone whose moral compass had been spinning wildly for months. "There must be something wrong with that veteran's property," she told him, sliding an envelope across the table. "Code violations, safety issues, anything that would require immediate action." Jake, a 20-year city employee who'd seen every corruption attempt imaginable, recorded the conversation on his phone before politely explaining that attempted bribery of public officials was a federal crime. Brenda's face apparently went through more color changes than a Phoenix sunset before she grabbed her purse and fled. The ethics complaint was filed within hours, creating an official misconduct investigation against our HOA president. Jake became an unexpected ally, warning me about future false complaints while documenting Brenda's attempt to weaponize city government for personal vendettas. But Brenda's real masterpiece of self-destruction was her social media smear campaign that escalated into digital stalking. She'd created a network of fake accounts across Facebook, Nextdoor, and Instagram, posting carefully cropped photos of Rex during his off-duty time to make him appear aggressive. These posts claimed I was faking disability for special treatment and sharing private medical information she'd somehow obtained through her PI surveillance. Miguel Rodriguez's digital forensics skills proved invaluable here. The kid had traced every anonymous account back to Brenda's home IP address and documented timestamps showing the posts were being created during her known surveillance activities. We had digital fingerprints connecting her to cyberbullying, defamation, and medical privacy violations. "Mrs. Whitmore really doesn't understand how the internet works," Miguel told me, pulling up network analysis that looked like something from CSI, Cyber. She's been using the same passwords, posting patterns, and even linguistic quirks across all her fake accounts. A first-year computer science student could prove this is the same person. The community response to Brenda's increasingly unhinged behavior was building like a summer thunderstorm. The Rex support rally that misses. Olivia organized drew over 60 residents to the community park, with local veterans groups adopting our cause as a broader discrimination case. Someone had even created "We Stand with Rex" yard signs that began appearing throughout the neighborhood like suburban protest art. Brenda's retaliation was swift and vindictive. Residents who'd publicly supported me started receiving violation notices for microscopic infractions: mailbox heights off by half an inch, grass 1 shade too green, basketball hoops too visible from street view. Her systematic intimidation campaign was creating more enemies than a politician during election season. The breaking point came when Brenda escalated to attacking my livelihood. She contacted my employer's HR department, claiming I was an unstable veteran whose service dog posed workplace safety risks during video conferences. She filed a fraudulent OSHA complaint about dangerous animals in home offices and began calling my clients directly with warnings about my mental instability. That's where Brenda discovered she'd picked the wrong target and definitely the wrong company. My employer, a cybersecurity firm that valued diversity and veteran hiring, responded to her harassment campaign by offering their legal team's assistance and publicly supporting my accommodation rights. Their HR director actually thanked me for bringing the discrimination to their attention because it helped them identify potential bias in their vendor relationships. The employment attack backfired so spectacularly that Brenda's real estate license became threatened. Her harassment of a disabled veteran's workplace violated fair housing laws and professional conduct standards. The state licensing board opened an investigation based on my employer's formal complaint. But Brenda's psychological breakdown was becoming visible to the entire neighborhood. Late-night drive-bys past my house increased to multiple times per evening. She began leaving threatening notes about final warnings regarding Rex's presence. Door-to-door campaigns to poison community opinion fell flat when neighbors realized they were listening to increasingly unhinged rants about fake veterans and dangerous animals. The final straw was her confrontation with Mrs. Olivia outside the grocery store, where Brenda accused the elderly widow of harboring supporters of dangerous dogs and demanded she stop bringing Rex treats. Mrs. Olivia, frightened by the aggressive behavior, called police to report harassment. Officer Martinez, who'd investigated the fraudulent animal control complaint, recognized the escalation pattern immediately. He issued Brenda an official warning about stalking behavior and documented the incident as part of an ongoing harassment case. 3 HOA board members privately approached me that week, requesting meetings to discuss resolving this situation before it gets worse. Chuck publicly withdrew his support for Brenda's methods. Linda expressed concerns about professional reputation damage. Even Dave worried about his city inspector connections being compromised by association. The trap was perfectly set. All that remained was letting Brenda spring it herself at the upcoming board meeting where the entire community would witness her final meltdown. Brenda's final acts of desperation made her previous behavior look like polite disagreement. With her authority evaporating and criminal investigations mounting, she launched a last-ditch campaign that crossed every legal and moral boundary imaginable. The attempted dog theft was so brazenly illegal, it belonged in a crime drama. While I was at a VA appointment, Brenda hired a private animal removal service, basically a guy with a truck who advertised on Craigslist. She told him Rex was an abandoned, dangerous dog that needed immediate seizure for public safety. Fortunately, Mrs. Olivia was gardening when this clown showed up with a catch-pole and official-looking paperwork that turned out to be completely fabricated. Her panicked call brought me racing home to find Rex safely inside while a very confused contractor tried to explain why he thought stealing a federal service animal was legitimate work. The contractor immediately cooperated with police when he realized he'd been hired for what amounted to felony theft. Arizona law treats service animal theft as a serious crime, with penalties including mandatory restitution and potential federal charges. The attempted seizure created another criminal complaint against Brenda, who was rapidly building a rap sheet longer than a CVS receipt. But her psychological warfare reached new lows with the fabricated bite incident that proved she'd completely abandoned reality. Brenda filed a police report claiming Rex had bitten a neighborhood child, providing detailed descriptions of injuries that supposedly required medical treatment. The investigation lasted exactly 4 hours. No child had been treated for dog bites at any local medical facility. No parents had reported incidents involving Rex. The victim Brenda described didn't even exist in our neighborhood. When pressed for specifics, her story changed multiple times before she claimed the family had moved away to avoid further trauma. Officer Martinez, who was becoming familiar with Brenda's pattern of false reports, cited her for filing fraudulent police complaints, a misdemeanor that would appear on background checks for her real estate license renewal. "Ma'am, this is the third false report you've filed in 2 months," he told her, according to the incident report I later obtained. "False police reports waste taxpayer resources and are criminal offenses. Consider this your final warning before we pursue charges." The community protection network that had formed around Rex and me was operating like a neighborhood watch program designed to monitor the watchers. Mrs. Olivia organized 24-hour surveillance schedules disguised as concerned neighbor check-ins. Miguel Rodriguez and his friends created a group chat that tracked Brenda's BMW movements with military precision. Even Bob the mailman started timing his deliveries to ensure Rex was never alone during outdoor activities. But Brenda's most catastrophic mistake was obtaining and sharing my confidential VA medical records. During a community meeting about holiday decorations, yes, she managed to weaponize Christmas planning. She stood up and began reading details about my PTSD diagnosis and treatment history. The room went dead silent as neighbors realized they were witnessing a federal crime in progress. HIPAA violations carry serious penalties, but sharing protected medical information in a public forum to harass a disabled person elevates the offense to potential felony territory. Amanda Torres nearly dropped her coffee when I called about the medical privacy violation. "Garrett, this is prosecutorial gold. Medical privacy laws don't mess around, and using protected health information to discriminate against disabled individuals is exactly what federal civil rights legislation was designed to prevent." The Veterans Legal Aid Organization immediately filed complaints with both the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice. Brenda had just handed us a federal case that could result in 6-figure penalties and potential criminal charges. Meanwhile, the professional consequences were mounting like Phoenix summer heat. Her real estate clients began requesting different agents after witnessing her increasingly erratic behavior. The local realtor association quietly distanced itself from her practices. Insurance companies started asking pointed questions about liability exposure for agents under criminal investigation. My investigative work revealed the final piece of Brenda's corruption puzzle: embezzlement of HOA funds. Pool maintenance contracts had been inflated to cover spa services at her personal residence. Landscaping bills included work performed on her private property. She'd been using community funds as her personal piggy bank for over 2 years. The financial fraud exposure created criminal liability beyond civil violations, and the evidence was hiding in plain sight within HOA financial records that any resident could request under Arizona law. Brenda's psychological breakdown became visible to anyone paying attention. Public outbursts at the grocery store about fake veterans taking advantage of real disabilities. Confrontational behavior toward other service dogs at the community park. Social media rants that revealed mental instability concerning enough that friends and family began expressing worry about her judgment. The final trap was set when Brenda announced her intention to have Rex destroyed as a dangerous animal, claiming authority as HOA president to override federal protections. This public statement, recorded by multiple witnesses and Miguel's ever-present phone camera, created the perfect setup for our ultimate confrontation. Rex remained the perfect professional throughout this chaos, demonstrating service animal behavior that contrasted beautifully with the surrounding human hysteria. Community children were literally asking their parents why adults couldn't behave as well as the dog everyone was fighting about. 10 days until the next board meeting, where Brenda would face a room full of witnesses, media attention, and the consequences of 3 months spent digging her own professional grave. The community clubhouse had never seen drama like this. 80-plus residents packed into a space designed for 40, with local media crews setting up cameras and veterans advocacy groups sending representatives. The air crackled with tension thicker than Phoenix humidity, and you could smell the anticipation mixed with industrial carpet cleaner and nervous sweat. Brenda called the meeting to order with her little gavel, trying to project authority while surrounded by hostile faces and recording devices. She'd dressed for battle in a power suit that screamed, "I'm definitely not having a breakdown." but her hands shook slightly as she shuffled through papers that would soon become evidence. "Tonight, we address the ongoing violation of community safety standards," she announced, her voice carrying that shrill edge of someone who knows they're cornered. "Federal disability laws do not supersede private covenant enforcement, and this board will not be intimidated by legal threats." That opening statement was so legally wrong it made Amanda Torres visibly wince. Federal law absolutely supersedes private covenants when it comes to disability accommodations. That's literally the entire point of civil rights legislation. I entered with Rex wearing his full-service vest, documentation folder in hand, and the quiet confidence that comes from having federal law on your side. The crowd's energy shifted immediately as neighbors saw us together, the professional service dog and the veteran he was trained to protect, facing down suburban tyranny with dignity intact. Mrs. Olivia stood first during public comment, her voice carrying the moral authority of someone who'd lived through actual hardship. "Rex is gentleman dog who help good man heal from war. Brenda is problem, not dog. Community no truth." The Rodriguez family presented their petition with 67 signatures supporting service animal rights, including personal testimonials from neighbors who'd witnessed Rex's exemplary behavior. Local veterinarian Dr. Sarah Kim testified about Rex's temperament evaluation, describing him as one of the most well-trained animals I've encountered in 20 years of practice. 3 military veterans in attendance stood simultaneously during my testimony, a silent show of solidarity that made the room's emotional temperature spike. When I calmly presented our chronological evidence of harassment, explaining federal ADA protections in terms everyone could understand, you could hear neighbors connecting dots about Brenda's systematic abuse of authority. "Service animals have the same access rights as wheelchairs," I explained, making eye contact with board members who were realizing their legal exposure. "Federal law doesn't recognize HOA exceptions to disability accommodations." That's when Amanda Torres rose to present the federal civil rights complaint, and Brenda's face went through color changes that would make a chameleon jealous. The attorney's presentation was surgical: disability discrimination, selective enforcement patterns, and personal liability for board members who'd violated federal law. "The HOA's insurance policy specifically excludes civil rights violations," Amanda explained to visibly uncomfortable board members. "Individual board members face personal financial liability for willful discrimination against disabled residents." Brenda's meltdown was spectacular and thoroughly documented. She interrupted the attorney's presentation with shouting about fake veterans and disability fraud, demanding to see proof of invisible disabilities while news cameras captured every unhinged moment. "This man faked military service to get special privileges for his oversized dog," she screamed, her composure completely shattered. "I don't believe any of his so-called PTSD diagnosis." The room erupted. Multiple neighbors stood to defend my service record. Chuck, the ex-cop board member, publicly apologized for enabling harassment. Linda called for an immediate vote of no confidence while Dave tried to distance himself from the sinking ship. The Phoenix Business Journal reporter seized the moment, asking Brenda to explain her own property violations while cameras rolled. Watching her deny photographic evidence of unpermitted structures and unlicensed business operations created viral video content that would haunt her professional reputation forever. "Board members follow different standards than regular residents," she declared, apparently unaware that admitting to selective enforcement on camera was prosecutorial gold. Then came the nuclear option. Amanda Torres presented the complete dossier of Brenda's violations: pool house setback violations, fence height infractions, unpermitted shed office, and financial records proving embezzlement of HOA maintenance funds. Officer Martinez arrived to serve Brenda with a restraining order protecting Rex and me from further harassment, creating perfect visual drama as authority protected victims from their abuser. The legal papers rustled like justice being served, while Brenda realized her harassment campaign had generated official police protection for her targets. The board vote was swift and decisive. Brenda removed as president 6-0, with her abstaining while muttering about conspiracies. Secondary motion rescinding all Rex-related violations passed unanimously. The board formally apologized and voted to reimburse our legal fees from HOA funds. Brenda's final exit was pure theater. She refused to accept removal, threatened to sue the entire neighborhood for defamation, and stormed out screaming about fake veterans and rigged elections while news cameras captured her BMW speeding away from the community she'd terrorized for months. Rex remained calm throughout the chaos, performing deep pressure therapy during my stress peaks and accepting congratulatory pets from dozens of supporters. He'd become the unofficial neighborhood mascot and living symbol of dignity, triumphing over petty tyranny. The celebration in the clubhouse after Brenda's departure felt like Liberation Day, with Mrs. Rodriguez elected as interim president and emergency policy revisions scheduled to prevent future abuse of authority. 6 months later, Meadowbrook Estates had transformed from suburban battlefield into a model community that housing advocacy groups now study as an example of inclusive governance. The new HOA board, led by President Maria Rodriguez, implemented transparent enforcement policies and established Rex's Rule, federal service animal protections with educational resources for residents who might not understand disability accommodations. Brenda's consequences unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion. Criminal charges for false police reports and HIPAA violations resulted in probation and mandatory community service at a veterans rehabilitation center, poetic justice that even Hollywood couldn't have scripted better. Her real estate license was suspended pending ethics investigations, and the embezzlement charges forced her to sell her violation-riddled house to pay legal fees and restitution. The restraining order prevented any contact with Rex or me, which turned out to be unnecessary since Brenda moved to Tucson shortly after losing her home. Sometimes karma doesn't need help. It just needs documentation and federal law enforcement. My personal victory extended far beyond winning a neighborhood dispute. The community support network that formed during our fight became genuine friendships that helped my PTSD recovery more than any medication. Rex's training was publicly validated through the most comprehensive real-world test imaginable, and our home finally became the healing sanctuary I'd originally sought. The federal civil rights settlement created a $50,000 legal fund for veterans facing similar discrimination, administered through Veterans Legal Aid with Amanda Torres overseeing cases. We'd turned our individual struggle into systemic change that would protect future disabled veterans from HOA harassment campaigns. The case became required reading for veterans advocacy training programs nationwide, and Amanda uses our documentation as a teaching example for building bulletproof civil rights cases. The key lesson she emphasizes: document everything, because harassment evidence builds powerful federal lawsuits that create real financial consequences for discriminatory behavior. Our story inspired similar cases across the country to seek legal recourse instead of suffering in silence. Rex became an unofficial therapy dog for other PTSD veterans, not in any professional capacity, but through informal community connections that formed around our shared experiences with invisible disabilities and the service animals that make normal life possible. The ripple effects reached the HOA industry itself, where insurance companies began requiring disability compliance training after our case demonstrated the financial risks of federal civil rights violations. Property management companies started hiring legal consultants to review enforcement policies because nobody wanted to face the kind of personal liability exposure that destroyed Brenda's career. The community transformation was remarkable. Annual Service Animal Appreciation Day festivals now raise money for veteran services while educating neighbors about disability accommodations. The dog park established with recovered embezzlement funds became a gathering place where Rex plays with dozens of four-legged friends, including the German Shepherd mix owned by the military family who bought Brenda's former house. Property values actually increased due to positive national media attention about our inclusive community governance. Veterans families specifically seek out Meadowbrook Estates because they know they'll find support rather than harassment for their service-connected disabilities and accommodation needs. 1 year later, I'm thriving in an environment where neighbors wave instead of spy, where Rex can perform his service duties without documentation challenges, and where community meetings focus on improvements rather than intimidation. The irony isn't lost on me that Brenda's harassment campaign created exactly the opposite of what she intended: a stronger, more connected neighborhood that actively protects its most vulnerable residents. The social good initiative we established continues growing. Rex's Fund Scholarship Program has provided service dog training assistance to 12 veterans, with annual fundraisers raising over $25,000 for local veterans services. Community partnerships with the VA hospital bring PTSD awareness events that help civilian neighbors understand military trauma while connecting veterans with resources and support networks. Mrs. Olivia, now 81 and still bringing homemade dog treats, summarizes the transformation best. Good people make good neighborhoods when they stand together against bullies. Her simple wisdom captures what we learned. Communities are strongest when they protect their most vulnerable members rather than targeting them for elimination. Here's the bottom line. Federal protections for disabled Americans exist specifically for situations like ours. When you know your rights and document violations, standing up to bullies doesn't just protect yourself, it creates safer spaces for everyone who comes after you. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Let's expose these power-hungry bullies and help other people know their rights. And don't forget to subscribe for more justice stories where the good guys actually win. Because sometimes fighting back isn't about revenge. It's about building a better world, one neighborhood at a time.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.